Evolutionary anachronism is the concept of a species evolving in a way to best interact with a now extinct species, leaving it with confusing traits that don't fit in well with the current environment. This relationship is largely seen in regards to how a living species used to interact with extinct megafauna. In this video, we will be discussing geological anachronisms that involved the megafauna from the late Pleistocene, which took place roughly 126,000 to 12,000 years ago. The origin of the term evolutionary anachronism came to fruition due to two scientists who co-published a research paper explaining the phenomenon. Dr. Daniel Hunt Jansen, an ecology professor from Penn State who researches biodiversity and ecosystems, worked with the late Dr. Paul Schultz Martin, who was a geoscientist from Arizona State University. Together, the two published the 1987 paper titled Neotropical Anachronism, The Fruit the Gomphotheres Ate, which would go down as a landmark paper for the concept of evolutionary anachronism. Dr. Jansen and Dr. Martin's research was based in Costa Rica. Focusing on fruits, the scientists were trying to explain why certain fruits were not being eaten and instead rotting under the tree or bush of origin. When inspected further, these plants had seeds and fruits that possessed odd traits such as size and extremely tough outside coating. Some of the trees themselves are extra thorny with protective traits that are simply overkill for the animals that exist today. Adelea rostrata, also known as Shilea rostrata formerly, are a species of palms that are one of the environmentally anachronistic trees found in Costa Rica. The trees produce a large nut that contains the seeds with a hard outer casing. The main consumers of these nuts presently are bruchid beetle and squirrel species, who very rarely disperse the seed. The tree has no other way of dispersing the seed effectively, so there must be a missing piece that helped this tree reproduce. Jansen and Martin hypothesized that this missing link took form of an extinct genus of megafauna, the gomphotheres. These large elephant relatives would have been large enough to easily eat one of the palm fruits whole, and fossil evidence shows that they had the teeth to do it. The tough casing that surrounded the nut would have protected the soft inner seed. Evidence of these palm nuts have been found in the Gomphotherium coprolites, or fossilized Gomphotherium feces. The palm trees provided the Gomphotheres with food and were adapted in a way that allowed the Gomphotheres to effectively spread the palm seeds wherever they traveled. The Osage orange was another important anachronistic fruit that helped Jansen and Martin reach this hypothesis. The scientists noticed again that the fruit had a tendency to pile up below the tree, unless there were cattle and other large mammalian livestock nearby. The cattle had no issues eating the fruit, and seeds were left over in their feces. This was another hint that the fruit was adapted to be eaten by large mammals as a dispersal method, and was another line of evidence for the theory of evolutionary anachronism of some of the fruits of Costa Rica. A similar example is found between the mastodons, a close relative of Gomphotheres, and ancient squash species. The ancient fruit from the Cucurbita genus, the genus that includes modern squash and other gourds, was much harder and much more bitter. Many rodents and small mammals would stay away from these fruits due to their bitter taste, yet mastodons had no problem eating them. The bitter taste came from toxins within the squash. Taser genes are the genes responsible for making the toxin taste bitter as a toxin recognition method, so the organism containing the gene would not eat the toxin. Mastodons still had no issues eating these fruits. Why? Well, first off, their size would mean that the amount of the toxin needed to kill them would be much larger than a squirrel-sized mammal. There is another interesting link to this theory, and it comes from genetic testing of living mammalian megafauna. Genetic tests done showed that elephants and cattle contain less copies of the taser gene, meaning they would detect the poison less. This would explain why the mastodons would eat the squash without any worry. The toxins deterred small rodents that were ineffective seed spreaders from eating the fruits, which were eaten by mastodons, allowing for effective seed dispersal through a unique relationship with the megafauna. Although the idea of evolutionary anachronism was initially used to link together herbivores and fruits, the concept can still be applied elsewhere, and it is not always in a mutually beneficial way. The pronghorn antelope is a species found in North America. While resembling antelope in both name and likeness, they are actually not related. The pronghorns are the fastest land mammal in North America, and by a wide margin. No predators can consistently keep up with them, and most of the predation on pronghorns occurs when they are still juvenile. If not to outrun any predators, why are they adapted to be so fast? Well, there's not really any reason anymore. However, when looking to the past, their speed starts to seem a lot less pointless. The fossil record displays evidence of a North American mammal with a common name, the American cheetah. These organisms have a skeletal structure that closely resembles living cheetah species, thus theorized to share many of their traits, such as speed. The presence of an extremely quick predator now explains why the pronghorns may have had to be so fast. The pronghorn's speed is now nothing but a way to run from the ghosts of the past and is an example of an animal-to-animal environmental anachronism. There is one example left to mention. If you have ever heard of this phenomenon in the past, even if you did not know its name, it is likely because of this example. However, this example is not all that it seems. Avocados are fruits with a giant seed and a soft outside that makes them a delicious fruit. The size of their seed makes them a perfect candidate for environmental anachronism. For many years, it was believed that the megatherium, or giant sloths, were responsible for eating these fruits and dispersing their seeds around where they traveled. Unfortunately, this is likely a myth. Giant sloth coprolites and their teeth structure point to them primarily eating leaves and other fibrous parts of the plants. To this day, there is no concrete evidence other than the size of the sloth and the size of the seed that tie these two species together. If the sloths did not eat them, what did? Although it might be a much more boring answer, the likelihood is that it would have been a species like the mastodons or gomphotheres that had much higher fruit-eating tendencies. The giant sloth theory stems from an outdated paper, but the mysticality of the idea of a giant sloth munching on delicious avocados have allowed this example to remain mainstream for many years. It's kind of funny in a way. The most known example of a term that most people don't even know happens to be one of the least supported examples of the theory. Before wrapping up, there is one more thing I'd like to address. If these species are missing key partners, why are they not extinct? Well, first of all, many of them may be. We are looking at this issue with a sort of survivorship bias. All of the studies on this topic have been done using living species, as the plant fossil record, especially seeds, can be extremely scarce and hard to interpret. There may very well have been species that relied so heavily on their megafaunal friend that they followed the mammals that they relied on to extinction. The second reason, as shown by the pronghorn, is that the term does not only refer to mutually beneficial species. In fact, the cheetah going extinct removed the pronghorn's chief predator, and the speed they adapted for the cheetah allows them to thrive now that the cheetahs are gone. The third and final reason is best seen with the squash, and that is human domestication. You might have been thinking, the squash I eat is actually pretty sweet. Human domestication over time has changed the species found in genus Cucurbita a lot. The continued planting of squash and pumpkins by humans helped fill the hole behind left by megafauna. Human domestication of animals can also bring back large mammals to places that had lost almost all megafauna, which again can replace the lost methods of seed dispersal. Evolution is a funny thing. Species sometimes evolve traits that serve a purpose that helps them survive. Sometimes species evolve traits simply because the traits did not kill them and happen to be passed on. Evolutionary anachronism shows that sometimes species evolve traits that appear useless or even harmful, but were advantageous in environments of the past. Evolutionary anachronism is proof that we live in a diverse, weird, and rapidly changing world.